Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and joining me in the studio is Rob Dew. He had a very interesting encounter yesterday at South by Southwest. He talked to the resident scientist for the Young Turks, Jade Lovell. Is that her name?
That's her name.
Okay. Yeah. I wasn't aware, Rob, that the Young Turks were turning into a scientific think tank.
They know everything because they're liberal and they're smarter than us, and because, Huffington Post said so. That's the basic attitude.
I asked for credentials because, normally I don't. I mean, I don't ask people's credentials. But
right.
the thing is that these people who like to pontificate about climate change and all this other kind of stuff,
science.
All these people, they love to parade their credentials around and say, hey, I teach at such and such a university, or I have a PhD. And you know what? They don't have PhDs in climate, okay, because it wasn't even offered as a field of study. It's so brand new, and so I would say in its infancy, but I would say it's really more infantile. Now, her thing right here is that she has a master's degree in science literacy. And I'm looking at this, and it's like when I was in engineering, I used to laugh about that and say, yeah, that's kind of like physics for arts and lovers. They would have one kind of physics track, which didn't have any calculus in it or mathematical analysis, and that would be the track that they go down. So now she's gone into.
But she does have a BS in neuroscience. My hat's off to her. At least she committed to meeting and having a debate.
Yeah.
She had just given a speech called Sci Wars, which is talking about how to talk to people like us who read for ourselves and think for ourselves and can research, and how to debunk the things that we say, but being very polite and nice about it. And she was very polite.
So then is that branch of neuroscience she's got in her background, is that really kind of more psyops, I guess?
It could be, It could be, So there's her thing, Sci Wars, the dark side of tactics for science. So that's her whole thing. So I was glad that she was able to, spur of the moment, too. I tweeted her during her speech, while her speech was going on. She got back with me within 10 minutes, I think her producer did, and said, sure, we'll meet you. Let's do it. And, that I was very surprised with. So my hat's off to her for committing to the debate. I have 3 clips. I put out the video this morning, Young Turks Scientists Debunked. And so that's out, and it's getting some pretty good views at this point. And it's long. It's about 15 minutes long, and I wanted to put the whole thing up. I cut out just a few things in the debate. We actually got thrown out for talking in front of the South by Southwest interactive sign, because that's a no-no.
Not supposed to interact in front of the interactive sign.
And not supposed to film at a film festival. I make that point, too. So the first clip, let's do this one. It's on climate change. She starts talking about climate change. So I'm like, okay, you picked the first subject, climate change. Let's go. And so I ask her a couple questions. And then, she proceeds to tell me that, it's all humans' fault, and it doesn't matter how much money it costs. We just need to buck up and pay it. And they're saying it could be $100 trillion to fix the problem.
They don't know, because the purpose of this whole thing is to establish they want to create a reason to have a world government and a way to fund the world government. Let's understand what's going on with this. I was out yesterday, as you know, and as I was driving around, my wife and I were looking at the thermometer in the car, as well as the thermometer on the bank, and they're 2 degrees apart. I said, look at that. That's more than it takes to melt the entire world, okay? And we've had the guy who founded the Weather Channel and did that for decades said, look, this generation doesn't understand the days when we used to have mercury thermometers. You'd read the thing. You'd have to be very careful you didn't get a parallax error. But everybody understands that there is if you really look at this, a scientist understands that there are limits, just like when we look at polling, okay? They say, well, that's plus or minus 4%, okay? And if they have a scientific poll or whatever. And those polls aren't too scientific either. But anyway, when you look at when you measure temperature, it depends on where you put the thermometer, even in the same area. You got it in the sun, or you got it in the shade, you're going to get a radical difference, and you're going to get more than 1 or 2 degrees. And yet they're telling us that the entire world is going to melt if we get a 1 degree raise, and they don't even have a legitimate base to compare this to.
They never had surface temps of Greenland or Antarctica to compare to with, for the whole world. If you're going to compare everything, you got to have thermometers everywhere. And then they've come out where they're cherry picking these results and picking hot thermometers around the world, like the thermometer at the airport, thermometer that sits in the sun, like you said.
Yeah, one of the first things that they made us understand in engineering was, okay, look, you guys, you're doing all this stuff, you're working with models, you're calculating this all out very precisely, but understand that there's a limit to the accuracy of what you can measure.
There's only so many variables.
Yeah, exactly. So understand that even though you get this down to 6 decimal places, first of all, throw that away. You need to go back to 3. That was one of the key things I said. Back in the days when we used to have slide rules, my professor said, we could only get 3 digits of accuracy, and that was much better. You guys think that you can get stuff down to 15 digits of accuracy. That's not there, and you got to understand what the tolerance is with what you're measuring. These people they don't have a base, and they don't understand what the tolerances are.
But David, you really don't know anything because you're not a Young Turk scientist. So let's let the experts speak.
Let's play some
This
clips.
is the one on climate change. Let's start with climate change. So you picked the first topic.
Yeah.
Here we go. So the Greenland ice cores show that the temperature of the planet used to be a lot warmer and a lot colder long before SUVs existed, long before coal power plants existed.
Absolutely.
So you could say maybe humans are causing an insignificant amount of climate change, but the money it'll take to reverse whatever they're doing is going to cost way more than what it would do if we just work on processes to get out of that. What do you say to that?
Great. There's 2 points there. One is, are humans actually causing climate change? Are we causing the climate to change more than it would have? And overwhelmingly, the science is in that, yes, the climate is changing much faster than it ever has before, even when it was colder and even when it was hotter. So you're talking about how it was colder and it was hotter, and that's true, but those changes happened over tens of thousands of years before humans were where we are now at the top of the food chain. So yes, the climate did change in the past. It would have been catastrophic if humans had been alive. And the climate change we're seeing now is happening on a much faster scale, hundreds or thousands of times faster. So absolutely, humans are causing climate change. What should we do about it is a great question. The economic argument is an interesting one. Do we want to keep the climate the way it is? Or can we afford to let climate change happen and just keep our economic policies the way they are? My opinion is that the amount of money it's going to cost us when the coast of North America starts to flood is going to be a lot more money to fix that than to stop and fix something here. It's like a stitch in time saves 9. If we do invest now, some people will have to pay an economic burden, but how much it's going to save us is like tens or hundreds of times more. That's my opinion, but it's the future, so who knows?
It's the future.
There you go. That's what you expect from somebody that didn't have to do math for their degree. It's like, just wave your hands and it's there. Look, the language that she uses, again, there's, climate change is changing or whatever. And she doesn't go back to global warming, okay? Right. And we had global warming. There was a question before that, before they wanted to say, are humans responsible for that? And the question was, is there global warming? Right. Okay. So now by saying climate change, they can ignore the fact that it's not warming. Yeah. Okay. And they can say, well, the climate is changing because it's always changing and humans are responsible. We got to create a world government to pay for it.
Kill humans. Yeah. Then we go into the life cycle of what trees do. And she said, there's no way, there's no studies out there that say, when there's more carbon dioxide, trees take more of it in and grow faster, which there are studies. I even put them in there. If anybody watches the video, they scroll down to the description. I put almost every article. I actually ran out of room in the YouTube description to put every article that is in that video. So, I back it up, try to with sources.
Did she say that there was nothing that showed that plants need carbon dioxide?
She said they won't. If there's more oxygen in the air, I don't breathe faster. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, right.
I just let her talk, really. And that's how you got to win these debates. Yelling at people doesn't really do any good. And she's, nice person. I'm not going to yell at her, Well,
I will say she was willing to talk about it, which is more than the people that Rob Jacobson and I ran into at the weather conference. It was the Meteorological Society had their thing there, and they had this group there from George Soros, and they would not say anything on the record.
If your ideas are so bulletproof, don't be afraid to express them and talk about them with others.
That's right.
And when you are, because I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid at all. I'll step up with anybody. It doesn't bother me. Now, I have 2 more clips. The next one is really funny. We go into GMOs, and we start talking about the gene gun. Okay, which is how they used to, and they still do this in some ways. It's changed, but when the technology started, the guy took a .22 caliber pistol, or used a .22 caliber blank to project genes from something else into vegetables, and they would see how they would absorb. But it was literally like, boom, like shooting it with a shotgun.
Pretty crude.
And she said absolutely nothing like that exists. And then I have to show her the evidence literally. So let's roll that clip.
Oh, okay. No, I totally understand. Yeah, that's fine. We can finish it downstairs. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's us getting...
I'll just do a tag out here and we'll finish it up.
That's us getting kicked out first.
All right, we've been asked to leave, so we're going to go downstairs and finish up this interview.
What?
Sorry, we can't actually have the fan in the back.
So we've been asked to leave. The really nice people from South by Southwest are like, we know this is film and interactive, but don't film here. Don't film where there's film. It's a film festival, so we don't want any filming going on. You're familiar with GMOs, right?
Yes.
All right, and I read a book about, I think it was by Jeffrey Smith, and describing how they make GMOs. He talks about the golden gene gun, where they actually, with a .22 caliber gun, they shoot genes into whatever they want to turn it into, and then they just see what happens. Does that sound like science to you?
In no way does anyone use a .22 caliber gun to inject
The golden gene gun.
the golden gene gun. In no way is that accurate.
Major alternative to the use of agrobacterium to get genes into living plant cells is a physical method called the gene gun, which literally shoots gold or tungsten particles into living plant cells, carrying DNA on their surface.
Okay, boys and girls, there's a clip.
There's still more.
In action.
I had to get two sources, David. I had to have two sources. But I gave three, actually.
Can physically fire DNA into a cell, allowing it to be transformed.
The first embodiment of this by the fellow at Cornell, John Sanford, who invented it, actually used a .22 caliber blank to accelerate a plastic bullet with a drop of tungsten and DNA on the tip towards plant cells.
Finally, here are a few desiccated gold DNA bullets, ready to go straight into the gene gun cartridge holder. Or you can store them at 4 degrees until required.
The plastic bullet would hit a donut-shaped plate with a hole in the middle, and the tungsten would spray out the other end, but the plastic bullet would stop, and the plant cells in the bottom would be bombarded at gunshot velocities. It turned out it worked.
That's not accurate?
No, we use polymerase, and we use chemical primers to, particularly with bacteria, to insert genes into the right place. They're not like ad hoc inserting genes. That wouldn't work. And elementary genetics tells us if you put a piece of DNA in the wrong place, it's just going to end up in an error. Like anyone that knows coding knows if you just take a piece of code and put it somewhere else, you get an error.
Yeah, well, here's
I like how she
boys and
says
girls.
era.
Yeah.
Era.
Here's the first safety tip when you're doing a debate, especially when it's about scientists. Never categorically say that something doesn't exist, no matter how strange it sounds, okay? And that's part of the problem, Rob, is that they do not want to look at the full spectrum of things. There's a very narrow narrative that they're selling people. They have defined this, and they don't really want to hear anything outside of their orthodoxy. Right. Okay. Right. And that's been the path to.
They don't look at all sources.
Yeah,
they look
exactly.
at their established line of what comes in. I remember somebody was commenting about something about Obama, and I sent them a Weekly Standard article. They're like, "Oh, Weekly Standard." Well, it's linked to sources. It had like 3 sources in there, and that's why I linked to it and sent it out. And it's like, okay, you don't like the Weekly Standard. That doesn't mean you could say everything. Whatever just because you don't like what they say doesn't mean you can say it's all false.
The problem is, and she's a good example of this, is this slavish devotion to conventional wisdom. It's what has thrown us under the bus with science over and over again. When you go back to the arguments with Galileo and the arguments with Louis Pasteur.
One man who said it was the center of the...
And all these other people say, of course that can't be right. Conventional wisdom says it's this, and this we know for sure.
We got a picture on the wall that shows the Earth in the center, okay?
That's right. Whenever you've got science, science should fundamentally be skeptical, and it should not accept anything as being done. I mean, the reason that the reason Langley, who was the preferred guy that had all the credentials and everything, couldn't get a machine to fly, and the Wright brothers could, was because they went back and questioned the data that was in the tables, and they went back and they did their own measurements on lift, and then they created their own wing that worked. Whereas Langley said, "Well, I know these came to me on a silver platter and a table, so it has to be right." And that's what we see over and over again. And worse than that is the idea that they have to purge anybody that doesn't agree with their conventional wisdom or their orthodoxy. And that's what science has become. This whole thing about climate change has become a religion.
Oh, yeah. And now it's like there's people saying the president needs to go after people. Senators are calling for people to be have RICO used against them.
That's right.
If you speak out against it. So you're not going to get as many people speaking out against it because there's already a culture of don't say anything.
You're not going to be tenured. You're not going to get that position, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, so in the end, though, she does say, hey, I'm a scientist, so I'm open to anything. But, you know, she has her beliefs, but she says she's open. So we'll see. We'll see if she watches this video and responds to it. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think she knows she's getting into when she said yes. And she'll probably get a lecture from, what's the guy's name? Sink or Chank, whatever his name is.
Yeah. Sink Uger or something.
Sink Uger, yeah. She'll probably get a talk from him like, look, we don't talk to Infowars. That's what we do. We don't talk to them.
Makes us look bad.
Yeah. The last clip, when she was talking about bacteria, we go to ask her about aspartame, where it comes from. She had no idea, even though I think she's done videos on aspartame too. And but this last one is about vaccines. So we hit we hit the Trinity. We hit climate change, vaccines, and GMOs. And glyphosate. I talked about glyphosate too with GMOs. So we did hit all three subjects. So I encourage people to go out and watch that and spread that video around. It'll be, I think we're going to post it Saturday morning on Infowars, but it's been out on Facebook and YouTube and all that. But let's play the last one. It's on vaccines. She goes right to polio. And I actually show tables from London that showed when they stopped making it mandatory, the polio, or not polio, the smallpox vaccine. When they started not making it mandatory, the death rate went down for polio.
Wow.
Okay.
That's something I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
We should never have a closed mind.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and I had never seen that either. I just, from digging, I was like, oh, look at this. Here's a table. And I just scrolled through, looked at it. I'm like, oh, I'm putting that in the video. And then I asked her, had she heard about the 50,000 kids who became paralyzed in India after taking the polio vaccine? Hadn't heard of it. Well, that was a big story.
Yeah.
A few years ago. Hadn't heard of it.
Maybe
so
they
I
didn't
don't know
cover that in the Young Turks.
That's right. Those sites are not, or they're verboten, as they say in Germany. Yeah. So let's play the last one. It's on vaccines.
You also talk about vaccines, right?
Mm-hmm, I do.
All right. One of my favorite subjects. So being a libertarian, you would think people have the wherewithal to decide what they want to put in their bodies.
Yeah, we have to make it. Some things I think are so dangerous that people just, there's no reason for them. So for example, the smallpox vaccine. I don't think that there is anyone ever that would suggest that not having smallpox in our lives is going to be a bad
That's just
thing.
A group of
that was clearly a good vaccine to have. But for things like influenza, did you have the flu shot?
Never.
So, the first two are when they were making it mandatory. The first two,
how busy we are, how much money we have, and
decades, and then look at it drop down after they didn't make it mandatory.
There's
down to like
milder diseases where I think we should have a choice. And
maybe
then
I can still frame that when we come back. That table,
where
guys.
I think we should all be vaccinated.
Do you know there's people in India, like whole villages, that have been injected with the polio vaccine and then become crippled with polio-like symptoms, although they're not calling it polio. Are you aware of that?
I haven't heard of that particular case study, but there is always a risk with any medical treatment. But if you had cancer, you'd probably want a doctor to go and help you and fix it. I believe that the risk of negative effect from most vaccines is so low that it's better to have the vaccine. But in many cases, the risks are kind of not.
Yeah, and of course, there's a risk with any medical procedure, but they're going to determine for you whether the risk is... Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. In our final segment, I'm David Knight here with Rob Dew. And, of course, we're going to go back and talk about this debate that Rob had with Jade Lovell, who is the resident scientist, I guess, now for the Young Turks. That's going to be going up on our YouTube site soon. Also, we're going to have tonight for the Nightly News, we're going to have a more formal presentation of the Nobel Peace Prize to our president, Barack Obama, in celebration of the nearly 1 million people that he's been able to kill as part of his presidency. And we have a new Trump scandal that Alex Jones is currently talking about right now, doing a Facebook mentions of. Before I go back to Rob, I just want to let you know that we also have a flash sale. This is a brief sale. Usually these are for about 24 hours, sometimes a little bit longer, but sometimes less because it's based on available supply. This flash sale is Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine. 37% off of retail, and you'll find that at InfoWarsLife.com. Of course, we've talked many times about how the presence of iodine in the food supply, they took it out of the salt. When they put it back into the food supply, IQ points went up as much as 15 points. Of course, they like to do things like put fluoride into the water supply, which they know causes a drop in IQ points. So that's what they like to do. They like to take out the stuff that helps your IQ, put in the stuff that hurts your IQ. You can take care of, and you have the ultimate responsibility for your health. You need to educate yourself what things you can do to help yourself, help your children. And, of course, iodine is an essential element. This is a great way to get a very pure form of iodine. Again, it's from 200-million-year-old salt crystals deep within the earth that they've mined out. And you can find this now at InfoWarsLife.com for 37% off retail. And another quick sale, we have a free colloidal silver toothbrush. That's a free antimicrobial colloidal silver toothbrush when you buy a bottle of Silver Bullet right now at InfoWarsLife.com. Rob, I didn't even know such a thing existed, but I'm going to have to get myself a colloidal silver toothbrush.
You better ask the Young Turks if it exists before we go any further.
Yeah.
Just let people know, if you're following my Twitter, Dues News with a Z at the end, I put the video up there. It is on our YouTube channel. And also I put a little poll about who won the debate. So watch it. And then, so it's either me, myself, Jade, Al Gore, or the Sun. I do have Al Gore. He makes a cameo to talk about rising sea levels. But then we show his house on the ocean.
That's right.
Come
and
on.
the Sun is S-U-N. Yeah. Just to clarify for the radio listeners.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. So, yeah, I mean, I just think it's amazing that, the way people have been cornered into where they get their information.
Yeah.
And you can really tell when people are closed-minded or when they get it only from one source. And I get it from all over the place. I go to Huffington Post all the time.
Well,
see what the crazy people are writing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always read a wide variety of things that I disagree with. When we're talking about politics, we're talking about science or whatever, because I want to try to keep from having a thoroughly closed mind. I mean, I've changed my position on Donald Trump. Not that I've changed my position on liberty issues, but because there were some things that I realized he was authentic on this trade issue. If I can nail if I can nail that down, I understand that's a significant difference between him and the rest of these people. That is a key thing. And I think when we look at these issues, and we've got some issues that we're trying to educate people on, and that is these automated driving cars, okay? And this lady who just came out testified as they're trying to nationalize these rules. They got a problem with safety, so they increased the rules in California. So then they go to Washington to try to shut down state rules. And, of course, we got somebody who's an expert talking about that. I was going to talk about that today. We didn't have time. Join us tonight on the Infowars Nightly News at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's it for our radio broadcast.